Good morning. The most important thing in each of our lives is our capacity to connect. This module is probably the most essential for cultivating that capacity. And the thing that impedes our capacity to set boundaries and hold them is our fear of losing connection with people. When we come to understand that keeping our own field beautifully clear, we enhance our capacity for deeper connection with others. When we are able to be wholly in that clear field, to be utterly at home in our own skin, to know where our skin ends and another person's skin begins, then we can touch skins wholeheartedly and fully embodied. When we allow people that we are deeply connected with and even not so deeply connected with to pull on us, to strive to get their own needs met to our detriment, then we allow weeds to grow in our field, and we can't make the best use of it and of ourselves to be of service. When our field is clear, we can do good work in it. We can do good, abundant, nourishing work in it. We can grow food for ourselves and others. If that field is full of weeds, it will not be very productive. That seems pretty obvious, right? So, how do we set a boundary? What are the fundamentals of that? First, we need to feel where a boundary needs to be set. And we really can't do that unless we're coming from a very solid, clean home space, unless our field is already clear to begin with. And the way we can start doing that is to do the box breathing, to do that. Inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 7, hold for 5, inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 7, and to do that for as long as we need to until we're completely in our bodies and our central nervous system is down-regulated and relaxed. Then when someone comes in to pull, we'll feel that pull. We'll feel that clench come up in our body. We'll feel that energy rising, that, like, you can't do that to me. Oh, but they can, and they will if you let them. And that clench impedes our capacity for intimacy and connection. And when I say intimacy, I'm not just talking physical intimacy. I'm talking about the barista at where you go to get a coffee. I'm talking about how you take in a tree. I'm talking about intimacy in the most basic sense. I'm talking intimacy in the way that you pick up the bowl that you put your oatmeal in the morning. The way you touch that bowl is an expression of how you touch everything. It's an expression of how you are in the world. You can have intimacy with that bowl. And ultimately, that's what we're going for. When you can be open to absolutely everything around you, because you trust completely that what will fill that clear field will be beautiful and nourishing. And to do that, we have to make sure it's clear first. That's our only job. That's our only job, is to keep that field clear, because then we can trust what comes into it. So by getting into that very clear home space, and then feeling when the clench comes up, because our baseline is that softness, then we can feel somebody coming in who just wants validation or their needs met, and we can provide that. We can provide that until it starts to be a drain, until it starts to remove us from our field. That's when two very, very handy phrases come up, which are so simple and so powerful. No, thank you. I'm not available for that. No, thank you. I'm not available for that. No, thank you. I'm not available for that. That's really all it takes. But then some people, if we're more accustomed to self-abandonment than we are to setting boundaries, there are people that are going to be shocked as shit to hear us say that. And so what do you do in that situation? Well, you return to that beautiful soft home space and you feel into that reaction. If the person that you're setting a boundary with is fully accustomed to hearing only yes from you, hearing no thank you, I'm not available for that, will come as a shock. And you might get a few different reactions. You might get the person who still comes back for more and will violate your boundary until they feel the consequences. You might have the person who is so happy for you because you're finally standing up for yourself. You're finally saying, this is where my skin ends and this is where your skin begins. And though we are connected, we are different. And I am allowed to tell you how we are different. You are allowed to tell people how you're different. Some people will not take your no. And it's good to realize that, because that is not a person that you can have a nourishing connection with. And it's good to clear your field of that person. And sometimes that person will be someone that you have to co-parent with, or is a coworker. And that's where the boundary setting becomes a matter of deep practice and a lot of diligence. With people that you will be in an ongoing relationship with. Knowing where your home space is becomes even more important. Knowing that you cannot go into an encounter with that person unless you are fully in your home space. And that's where the rare protocol then comes in. How do we go back and continue to set a boundary with a person, right? By being utterly in that space and then using the rare protocol. And what's rare? Receive, assess, respond, exit. But before we can really receive, we have to be fully in that soft place where we know we can respond rather than react. We can fully trust. We can't go into that encounter until we can fully trust that we will respond rather than react. Respond is soft, react is clenched. So really being in our body so much, so completely, being able to have that quick tap on the head or tap on the heart that just keys us into that soft, relaxed place. Where whatever the person's motivations are for pulling on us, it doesn't matter. We trust completely that we can respond to that pull with a softness, so that there's nothing to pull on. No, thank you. I'm not available for that. So then we can receive their request. We can receive someone else's boundary, even. We can really take it in, and we can assess how that appears in our field. Does that appear as a flower? Or does that appear as garbage? Is it litter, or is it a blossom? If it's litter, we need to remove it from the field. And we can say, no, thank you. I'm not available for that. And that's where that fully embodied assessment comes in. And then the response, respond, no, thank you. I'm not available for that. Exit. If we are available for that, no problem. We can do that. If we are not available for that, we can cleanly and compassionately state that. It's really that simple. It's really that hard when our conditioning and our desire to be liked, or our desire to have other people tell us that we're a good person, when that comes up, it's very hard to say that simple phrase. Really hard. What if they don't like me? What if they judge me? What if they think I'm a bitch? What if they think I don't care about them? Well, if it is someone that you care about, setting a loving boundary is the most potent expression of that love. It's you taking responsibility for your capacity for intimacy. It's you taking radical responsibility for yourself, and radical responsibility for keeping your field clear, so that you can know wholeheartedly what your next right action is. I mean, I had a lot of boundary setting to do with my family of origin, especially with my parents. There were a lot of things where I was being asked to reflect on them in a way that they felt they wanted. Like they wanted me to be someone that they had in mind. And I'm not that person. And instead of me demanding that they see who I really am, which is not an effective way, a boundary is not a demand. Those are two very different things. I simply let them know what I was available for and what I wasn't. And that has changed our entire relationship. Because I don't do it with a fuck you in it. I used to. When my coach Perry taught on boundaries and said, boundaries have no fuck you in them. I mean, this was such a profound revelation for me. I was like, oh my God, I've been doing it so wrong for so long. Once I cleared my field, I realized that I am secure and stable within myself. I know what my field looks like, and I know who I am. And so there's no need for me to control anyone else's behavior. I simply allow people to know what I'm available for and what I'm not. And people really do get the point pretty quickly. They start to understand, and people will have no option but to meet you where you are if they want to continue the connection. And if they don't, that's okay too. And that's the hard part of setting boundaries. Because there are some people with whom you will lose your connection. And you will have to completely trust that in that space, something that belongs with you will come. And that is so hard. That is so hard. Especially if you're accustomed to self-abandonment, and being very externally oriented in how you see yourself, if you are accustomed to letting other people tell you where the parameters of your skin are, where your skin ends and begins, if other people have been telling you that for a long, long time, it's really hard. It's a hard thing to claim. This is where my skin ends and yours begins. And we are intimately connected. Our energies are always mingling, and we are different. And here is where we are different. And I'm going to respect that. So whatever you do is really your business and not mine, because this is where my skin ends. And even as I say this to you, I hear how simple it sounds and how difficult it has been for me to fully embody. How many years it has taken to trust that something else will really come in. Something that belongs with me will always, always fill that space that I've cleared in my field. And it really is as simple. Setting a boundary is as simple as receiving the person, assessing their behavior, assessing how their behavior lands in your body, responding to it from your fully embodied skin, and exiting. And what the reverberations of that look like are also largely none of your business. If someone needs to take time and space away from you to see where you're standing now, return to that home space, return to that box breathing, and let them get the view of your essential self. Let them see where you are standing now, in the middle of your field, sovereign, powerful, and free. And the next time they come up to your gate, you receive, assess, respond, exit that encounter, and maybe you've opened the gate. Maybe you haven't. But that is your sovereign choice. That is your free choice to make. I had a situation where my first job that I had in sobriety was with this landscaping company, with this boss who was just really challenging. And she was a very good teacher of boundaries. And there was one day when we were out in the field and there was this big old hydrangea, right? Maybe like a 30-year-old hydrangea, huge. And she wanted me to divide it. And so I didn't have my saw in my pocket, so I was using a spade, and I was like jumping on the spade and like sliding off the root ball because the hydrangea had already been dug out of the earth. And she was standing there with the caretaker of that property, and they were laughing at me as I was like struggling to divide this hydrangea. The two of them were standing there and thought it was very funny. And this was like not out of character for this particular employer. And so a few minutes later, I took her aside and I made sure I didn't speak to her until I was fully in that home space, totally calm. And I said, my labor is no longer available at the current rate. If you would like to negotiate a higher rate, I'm open to that. So we set up a meeting for later, and I made sure again that I was very much in my home space. I received her disinterest in the boundary that I had set around the value of my time. And I assessed her approach to that. I assessed her refusal to accept the boundary. And I responded with, I can take either the low wage, the hard labor, or the disrespect. You can pick two of those, but you can't have all three. And she said, I can't give you a raise because you use vulgar language in the field, which I absolutely did. And so I was left with with no choice, really, like, except to nod and say, well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to have this meeting. I stood up, I shook her hand, and I walked out the door. And I lost that job. 1 month later, I got one that paid twice as much, still doing work that I loved, with a much, much kinder boss, half the hours. And it was actually everything that I had wanted. I was like, oh, I love doing this work. But boy, I would like to get paid what my time is worth, and I would like to be treated like a person. And that happened. But I had to go in to set that boundary with absolute acceptance and willingness to hold the consequences. And was I scared at the time? I had no other prospects at that time. I only had my intention, and I only had my truth. And I ran up against somebody else's truth, and that is part of the consequences that are inherent in holding a boundary. And I walked out that door knowing that I had done the right thing, but also with total uncertainty about what was going to happen next. How was I going to pay my rent? Who was going to hire? Like, what was I going to do? I didn't know. But I knew that what I had done was true and clean and right. I cleared the space in my field. I cleared the litter out of my field for something to grow. And that takes an incredible amount of trust. An incredible amount of trust. Trust that you could even call faith. I'm not a big God person, but I certainly do believe that almost everything is more powerful than I am. And that my share of power, the power that comes through me, comes from keeping this vessel clean and ready for service. That's the most empowering thing that I can do is to keep my field clear and know where my skin ends. To know and be prepared to take full responsibility for keeping that field clear. Full responsibility, including any losses, any grieving for those losses. There's this lovely, lovely phrase that grief is just love with no place to go. And for me, what that means is my capacity to be in love with no object is the better part of my home space. That my capacity for love needs no object. And actually, once I start to hook it onto an object, it becomes muddied in its radiance. if I am pulling on another person to be the object of my love or my attention or my affection or my power, that's no longer a clear field. If I invite someone in to be in the field with me, in the clean, clear field, I invite their clean, clear field into my clean, clear field. Well, that is where magic happens. That is pure magic. And that takes not only you to be responsible for your field, but to only allow people in who are also responsible for their fields. And there is a challenge. And that's not to say that we all always have clean, clear fields, and nor should we expect to. That does not seem to me to be within the realm of possibility. But it's the diligent, responsible cultivation of that clarity that makes all the difference. Being a person is hard. And sometimes we want to grab onto somebody else or pull on somebody else so that we don't have to be in our own field. Because that responsibility is enormous. When you really step into your power and really see what you're capable of in your fullest, most honest, loving clarity, what will come to you will be challenging to be responsible for. And that's where the trust comes in again. You have to trust that that belongs with you. There's this wonderful quote from Carolyn Mace where she says that everyone is born with a fragrance, right? And it's up to you whether you want to be eau de toilette, cologne, or perfume. And whether you want to be eau de toilette, cologne, or perfume is directly related to how much suffering you are willing to endure, how much you are willing to take in, how much uncertainty, how much grief, how much love, how much joy. How willing are you to expand your capacity for life? And sometimes that expansion of capacity can be a very literal, visceral, physical thing. Like in my post earlier, which I hope you will all read before our Q&A on Wednesday, I talk about taking that energy of self-abandonment and bringing it fully into my body and looking at the erotic shadow of that, the erotic charge in self-abandoning, the release of, of releasing my responsibility for my field, the release inherent in handing that power over to someone else so that I would not have to be responsible for it. And there was a charge in that for me. Here, I'm going to give you my field. I don't think I'm up to the job. I don't think I'm mature enough to tend this field. And I did that for years. I did that for years before I could really fully step into it, step into my own gate, be like, this is my skin, this is who I am, and I am secure enough in that to know fully in my body when I'm getting in my own way. When I have added another gear to my identity turbine and let it spin and let it drown out my big self, the little voice of my big self, if I'm drowning that out and squandering all my energy and running that turbine because it's what my idea of power looks like, it's that externally validated form of power, what I have, what I know, what I, what I want, what my goals are, all those kinds of things, that they all belong to the identity turbine. They do not belong to the essential self. The essential self does not have goals. The big self does not have goals. The big self's only goal is to keep that field clear. And then the next correct action, the next right action will be revealed. And you do that. And then you do the next one. And then you do the next one. And the rest will take care of itself. Seriously. And that takes an incredible amount of trust, which you are capable of, which we are all capable of. And with that trust comes an incredible amount of love and an incredible amount of joy and an incredible reduction in suffering. But we have to let go of the things that we think we want, the preferences. And understanding just how damaging those preferences are really helps clarify where boundaries need to be set. If we're running against just something we'd rather have, and we have a thought about, oh, I'd rather have this and I'm not getting it. Well, that is your little self enacting a boundary violation on your big self. That's you throwing litter into your own field. And that's a harder boundary to set and maintain. Those are harder consequences to be responsible for because you're also the one setting them. So it's really, again, just getting back to that home space so you can hear the hum of the identity turbine and how it's different from that embodied truth. And this is a very subtle thing. Where is the soften and where is the clench? Our own thoughts can make us clench so often and so hard. And we can be for so many years in that perpetual cycle of clenching ourselves and littering our own fields that it can be really challenging to be like, oh, that's me doing that to me. I don't even need an external object to come in and clench me up. I can do it all by myself. And then where is that capacity for intimacy? Where is that capacity for connection? And then where are our lives? If our capacity for connection is the most important thing in each of our lives, and we're clenching ourselves, how can we connect? We can't connect clenched. We cannot connect clenched. We can only connect open. The more we clench, the more we squander our lives. And it's easy to blame somebody else. Oh, you made me feel ... If you find yourself saying to someone, you made me feel guilty, you made me feel loved, you made me feel happy, none of those statements are true. None of them. You are responsible for your responses. Responsible. You are responsible for your responses. What someone else needs from you is subject to your discernment. Is that something you can give? Or is that something you cannot give? It's very simple. Are you available for that? Or are you not available for that? Are you not available for that, but you are going to make yourself available for that because self-abandonment is easier than responsibility? Because it is sometimes. Sometimes it is easier than responsibility. A lot of times. Because then you have the path of blame wide open for you. Oh, well, that person wanted that. That person made me feel that. That person just doesn't appreciate me. Well, if you appreciated you, that person wouldn't have a choice to not appreciate you. You take that choice away from them. I mean, that's why if you're dealing with a person who is labeled a narcissist, well, if you look behind a narcissist, you will find a person with no boundaries. Someone cannot, it's not about changing someone else's behavior, but just taking away their capacity to enact that behavior on you, if that makes sense. You take away the reaction, and so the behavior has nothing left to pull on. All right. Well, that's it for boundaries for today. I'm looking forward to our Zoom call on Wednesday and to hear how all of this is playing out in each of your lives and where you're having ease with letting people know that you're not available for things and where you're having a struggle. Um, please read the post that I put up on Saturday. It's very comprehensive and a lot to digest. I know that. But do try to take it in. Thank you so much for being here and happy June.